Hey, another update from me. Um, this time looking at the Pensions and Lifetime Saving Association retirement income targets, pensions modelling type stuff. Um, Kicking off though, just a reminder of why we'd be looking at that. Um, we want to have great UX is one thing, but we also want to have content that we're proud of is another thing. And both of those really kind of mean we need to do more in MyEva. And this is probably the first real example of where we're jumping into that. And the key thing here is internalizing the action. So right now, MyEva does quite a lot of, hey, you need to go and set up a savings account, go to National Savings and Investments, or compare the market to find a good rate, and figure out how much you need to save and all that kind of stuff. Really, what we need to be doing is bringing all that calculation, all that good stuff into MyEva, so people feel like they're getting mad value. So Martin and I presented on the PLSA a couple of weeks ago, probably longer than that at Show and Tell. There's a ton of interesting stuff that went into it. It's a really big, exciting opportunity for Turo and for MyEva. They're looking to launch the standards and all the research in October, and they'll be doing a huge press release when they do that. They'll be naming us as an early adopter and a tech provider in that kind of space. So the opportunity is for us to kind of ride off the back of that. We also really believe in the retirement income targets, so we want to use them in our product anyway. And here's how we might do that as an early start for 10. If maybe I kind of jump into to this guy here, just to give you a reminder of what they are. Okay, so this is a prototype that that Kai's put together. Stunning as per usual. So the kind of idea is that these guys who are kind of like a government body, a Quango, I think is the term, partnered up with the industry. So everyone from DWP to Aviva, I think LV, tons of people there, to figure out how do we solve for the fact that only 23% of people know how much they actually need to save in order to have a good retirement. If you think about Pension Wizard right now, we just ask you how much do you need. It's a really kind of fuzzy thing that no one really has an answer to. We do a lookup to the ONS kind of data to give you a rough kind of figure. But these guys basically spent a few years doing research and figuring out how do we set some targets that people can aim towards. And that's kind of what sits behind this. So a lot of the language has been agonized over and is sort of set in the standards and the categories. So it's really how do we take all of that research and put it into a journey or a product, a digital product that someone can use and consume. And our thinking is we do that in kind of a few ways. So first up is literally an explorable kind of intro to the targets themselves. So there's a little bit of change that will come in this design shortly. So right up top, there will be the three categories, which are basic, comfortable, and cozy, something like that. That basically say to have a nice retirement, you need about 25 grand. To have a really nice retirement, you need 35 grand. And just to get by and not be in kind of poverty in retirement, you need 17 grand. But that raises then the question of, well, how did you get to those numbers? And it's a little bit like RPI or inflation when they have a basket of goods and they track the cost of those. So the research basically went out and said of the people that would describe themselves as having a moderate, like quite a nice retirement, but not a really comfortable one, how much do you need? And then they looked at things like how much would you spend on food, what kind of car would you have, what kind of wine do you drink? And there's basically like little titles kind of below. I think travel's the nice one. So obviously these are the total targets, not the individual targets. There won't actually be monetary amounts down here. It will just say if you want the kind of a moderate retirement, you're probably going to be looking at 1 or 2 short breaks in Europe a year. And maybe that makes some sense. There is this thing that you can explore. That's the main thing I'm trying to tell you, isn't it? The other thing we'll have is a quiz. Now, the targets aren't really designed so that you can say, I want really nice holidays, but I don't drink much wine, so I'm somewhere in the middle. They're really just designed as 3 buckets that help you set a goal. But what we're thinking is we could probably do a little kind of quiz that helps you figure out, well, if you're picking loads of these things, then you're probably looking at a minimum kind of income. Whereas if you're probably like everyone's going to be picking all the nice stuff, it just says or frames in your mind that you need to aim for quite a lot. So there's that component to it. And then the final one is the actual hitting the target. This is the real key thing in a lot of ways. So how does this work? You've got the 3 targets that are kind of clickable, and obviously they're going to update the income target over here. You can obviously navigate back to the targets to explore where do these numbers come from. So the idea is that these 3 different components have a loose connection but could be done in any order. There's also a little modeler over here, because this is the real thing. It's all nice saying that 50k for a comfortable retirement is how much you need, but the next question that follows is, well, how much do I need to save, and am I on track for that? So we've built this really simple little modeler down here that's going to ask, how much have you got saved so far? What are you contributing each month? What's your current age? When do you want to retire? And then we'll basically do a little bit of maths in the background that says, based on those numbers, you're on track for about 18k. Which is great if you're looking for a minimum kind of retirement target, but probably not so great if you want the comfortable. And then you'll obviously be able to play around with this number and see how much you need to contribute. The main thing really is to drive a call to action. It provides you with it provides you with the problem and some of the solution. But there'll be a nice big call to action at the top here in the MyEva version that says sign up for MyEva and get some advice on properly solving this. These little buttons down here, obviously the retirement income targets have a London weighting. So if you want to retire in London, it's going to be more expensive. And if you want if you're going to retire with a partner, that's obviously more expensive. The only other thing to show then is the kind of rough use cases. So we want to make sure whatever we build is reusable in a few different ways, but there might be a few different ways to kind of interact with content. So this guy, the pig up here, is bought into the product. He is registered as a MyEva user. So their experience is going to look a bit like a new to-do gets added, which is set your retirement income target. That's going to fire a chat which introduces the targets, explains what they are, and then generates you a few more to-dos. The first of which is exploring the targets. Think about that as this guy here. So it's going to fire in MyEva version of this. The other one is the quiz. So you'll get this guy. And then finally it's the modeler. So you'll have a to-do for that as well. And then obviously the final call to action. I've said here a call with Pat. I guess if they have Pension Wizard configured up, it would be jump into Pension Wizard and do this properly. If they don't, we need to think about what a paying MyEva D2C customer would experience. Because right now we don't have D2C pension advice if you're paying you £2 a month. Yeah. Importantly, on that kind of jumping into Pension Wizard, we've got to think about the maths here. And Pension Wizard is giving advice, and it's giving advice to people where we know a lot of details about them and their pension already. If you want to bake out all of that detail in here to make it the same level of accuracy as Pension Wizard, you end up making the experience not as good because you're trying to, for every incremental bit of accuracy in the pension forecast, you obviously need a lot more data. And that's not really the point of what we're trying to do here. Here's just a slighting shot of where you're at. So the numbers are going to be different. If you go through this and then you go through Pension Wizard, the income forecast is going to be different. My point is that we're comfortable with that because they're different tools doing different things, although they are in a similar space. So that's what you'd feel like if you were a MyEva user. We also, because of all the press that's going to be bubbling around, want to make this accessible for people who aren't kind of registered users or don't have to register. So this is the chickens, so the people that aren't really bought into the product right now. Because we know there's going to be a couple of opportunities here on the Chiro side, which is the branding we started with here. Whether it's Aviva or any of these kind of big lumbering slow beasts that might really like the targets but can't mobilize their internal teams to build it. We want to be out there saying our product already uses these, and actually there's a small widget that you could put on your website that looks like this if you wanted to launch really quickly. So we want to do that on Chiro. Also on myeva.com, if we're out there talking in social media and press releases about how we're adopting these standards, hopefully that's going to drive a ton of traffic towards myeva for people who want to kind of play around with this stuff. So the idea is there's probably like a blog post that talks about what are the targets and has these kind of options at the bottom somewhere on myeva.com. So you don't have to register for myeva to use these, is the point. And then from that blog post, you can fire these tools and play around with them. You can even play around with this calculator, again, before you've even logged into myeva or created an account. So the call to action after you've done all of those things as an anonymous user would be to register for myeva. And yeah, the intent is for both of these that we convert a ton more users. And these blocks just show that these are actually the same bit of core logic behind the scenes. We're just going to slap a Chiro brand on it or a myeva brand on it and make it possible to do it from within myeva as a registered user or as an anonymous user on the website. So we're getting, like 5 things for the price of 1. And then there's a little kind of note down here that Scott already did a ton of work on the maths for this modeler. And if you've made it this far, you're probably interested what that maths looks like. So there's a little spreadsheet knocking about that has some details on how the maths works. And right now we're working with the fitties to make sure that the maths is all legit. And hopefully that's going to give us a ton more than just that little modeler that we looked at. So we might be able to do things like look at the value of the tax relief that you get in your pension contributions and say, did you know just by investing this in a pension rather than an ISA, you're getting X, 40 grand of tax relief. Isn't that cool? Thanks.